is a screenwriter. Micah is a screenwriter based in LA. He writes for the show Transparent, which has just been nominated for 2 Writers Guild Awards, including Best New Series and Best Comedy. His feature film, The Motel Life, starring Dakota Fanning, won Best Screenplay and the Audience Award at its premiere at the Rome Film Festival. He also has a feature script due tomorrow to Fox Searchlight, which Micah says is totally not freaking him out and giving him nightmares, where he is on trial and the jury is all of his dead childhood pets. A little bit about the show Transparent. It is on Amazon Prime, and it's about a father of a complicated LA-based Jewish family who comes out as transgender to her children. And finally, just a little bit about kind of the talk now and what's going on now. It's part of a new program called Bronx Talks, which are briefing calls and conversations led primarily by alumni speakers about a mix of current events and diverse issues and interests. Okay, so now that we've kind of got those introductions done, Micah, it'd be great if you could start us off. You just speak to us a little bit about your work and how it's been meaningful for you.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. It is really an honor to be here. I owe BYFI so much, including my wife, Liba, who I met on our summer program in 2000. So I see this as, I think, actually the least I could do to repay this organization that I love so much. So, first of all, it's very strange just to talk kind of into a vacuum and not be able to see you nice people. But I'm assuming you guys can hear me.
We're here.
So, okay, great. So, yeah, I'm a writer on this show, Transparent. We just finished our first season, and I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of how I got involved in the project, and then just looking ahead, I'm also more than happy to talk to anyone or answer questions that are not just about the show, but maybe about people who might be interested in TV writing or streaming, or the difference between TV and streaming, or if anyone wants, a review of Amazon Prime in its own kind of freaky way, because the show is on Amazon Prime. We're sort of this weird loss leader for 2-day shipping. So in a strange way, we're actually just helping people get their toilet paper faster. So that's an honor. So I started on Transparent when Jill Followay, who's the creator of the show, gave me a call. She and I had been friends through a lot of sort of LA Jewy things. She and I co-founded an organization called the Eastside Jews together, and we had done some work developing some other TV shows that we didn't get to sell at networks. And it was actually sort of a time in Jill's career, and she's written about this, where she was really frustrated with the way that kind of things were going. She was a sort of a journeyman TV writer, had worked on 6 Feet Under, and then had taken a series of jobs kind of coming on to other people's projects. And she could sell a show at networks like HBO and Showtime, but there was such a bottleneck in development for her that she knew that the likelihood of having a show that she sold to that network was going to actually get made, much less get picked up to series, was very slim. So it was around this time when Jill was going through kind of a frustrating period that she decided to direct a movie, which went to Sundance, and empowered her to be a little bit more assertive in what she was asking for from the town, from the business. Also around this time, her father came out as trans around age 70. And she is someone who, and I won't talk all about Jill, but she's someone who writes very much from a place of autobiography. She is looking at her own life a lot, and she saw this as not just, an interesting concept for a show, but really, truly, and deeply a way to process a lot of these feelings that she had, that had sort of emerged for her. Particularly, what she describes as the kind of the need to make the world a little bit safer for her parents as they were transitioning. And also a way to process a lot of complicated and sometimes ugly or unsettling emotions that were coming up for her, realizing that so much of her childhood was shaped by her experience of being parented by someone who was hiding something, who was wrestling with something. And for that to kind of come out was a real catharsis for her and her sister, Faith, who was also a writer on the show with me. But that's what drove her to write the pilot for Transparent, which she took to Amazon. Amazon put it into production with some good guarantees that it would actually see the light of day. And if not, that she would be able to get the show back and be able to set it up somewhere else, because it was such a personal thing for her. When she first wrote the pilot, I was there, sort of part of, there's a great creative community on the east side of Los Angeles, a constellation of neighborhoods that are sort of up and coming, where people are always game to read whatever their friends are writing, to give notes. So I was brought in to sort of help talk about this pilot script, and then when it was shot, to help look at the cuts. And when it was picked up, Jill gave me a call and asked if I wanted to be part of this show. And one thing I want to talk about, in addition to the sort of the extreme Jewiness and specificity of the LA Jewiness of the show, is also the creative process of making it. And I have a feeling that this might be relevant, not just for people who are interested in how TV is made, but people who are interested in kind of the creative process generally, and how ideas become something more tangible. This was, and this continues to be, the most unique and special and exciting creative experience of my life. Partly because we are in an environment, a work environment that is unlike any other. Some headlines about the writing process of Transparent. We only work for 4 hours a day. 4 hours a day. There are 4 writing sessions each day in the 20 weeks that we have to write the series. And the idea behind that is a very humanitarian one. It's also a very pragmatic one. There's a very kind of chauvinist idea in TV especially, where we have to sort of produce a ton of content on a deadline. That the best way to go about doing that is to work forever until you die and hate yourself, which is you and a bunch of people, usually men, sitting in a room together, hashing it out. If you like your idea and I like my idea for something, for whether the character should go to the drugstore or should go to Chuck E. Cheese pizza, you and I are going to sit there and argue about it and try to politic and marshal the support of other writers in the room. And then there can be a stalemate, and it can keep going, and feelings get hurt and egos get abused, and then the process repeats. You are basically a prisoner of the showrunner or the writer who is running the room. Jill's idea and this sort of creative process is completely the opposite. We arrive, we sit together, our computers are away, our phones are turned off, and we work for 1 hard hour. In that hour, in this space, it's sort of a sacred space. It's something very spiritual about what we're trying to do together. And that is, it's a space where you can't say no. Everything is sort of underpinned with the improv ideal, the improv comedy or improv theater ideal of yes and. So if you and I are disagreeing about where the character should go, we allow both of those ideas to exist and allow the story process to unfold and lead us in a certain direction. The composition of the room is also very unique. We refer to it as the writer's womb because I am completely outnumbered as a straight white man who is cisgendered, meaning not transgendered. So the experience and the feeling of the room is a very different and unique writer's room, and that is totally by design. And in between each of these hour sessions, of which there are 4 a day, we take breaks, we rest our minds, and we allow story to sort of come. And we have faith and trust that we have enough time and that the process will not take care of itself, but working diligently in these windows as hard as we can, with as much focus as we can, we'll actually get done what we need to get done. So the other thing I'll say about the show that is unique in sort of a more general way is, I don't know if any of you have been part of making something, a film, a book, writing an article, anything that's sort of, broadly speaking, creative. There is always this period where the thing you've done, or at least this is my experience up until this point, kind of gets nipped and tucked, gets changed, gets transmogrified, gets corrupted, dies a little bit, has to be revived, maybe has plastic surgery and you don't recognize the thing when it's done. This has been my experience, and certainly in film and television, it being such a collaborative art where it requires millions of dollars and hundreds of people to execute these art projects. That is the case, and sometimes for the better. But I can tell you this, that we were fortunate that Transparent got the praise and attention that it did. But regardless of that, this is the show that we set out to write on the first day of the writer's room. And it has arrived on screen so purely and in such an unadulterated way that I hope that that other people, other creatives and creators are inclined to fight for that, which is a feeling that we were protected by our benefactor, in this case, Amazon, our studio, our network, and that they trusted us to do what we said we would do. So there's that. And then I'll talk just really briefly before I open up for questions or comments or complaints, which is about the Jewish component of the show. It was a really great day in my life when Emily Nussbaum, who I love, who is the television critic for The New Yorker, said that Transparent was I think the Jewiest show that ever Jewed. And I really loved hearing that. We set out to write a show about this very specific Jewish LA family, knowing that the species of LA Jew is different from kind of the sort of traditional archetypal New York Jew or other Jew forms, Jew characters that have been represented. And it's a little hard to define kind of what that is. We didn't set out to write, this is the story of the LA Jew or the California Jew, but at every turn we were able to to really write specifically about a Jewish family. So I loved writing lines in which we didn't have to explain what, I don't know, Tu B'Shvat was, or in which there's a mikvah, or a bad cantor singing Hine Matov to a partially attended Friday night service in kind of a dying denominational synagogue. We have a female rabbi character. We have a bat mitzvah that never happened at the center of the backstory of the series. We got to be as Jewy as we wanted to be, and didn't have to apologize or explain or translate. And what I love about that, and why it was so thrilling to write, was not just because I feel like Jews haven't been represented properly in the media or in the mainstream or any of that. What was exciting was it was a personal story. We were writing not for our imagined audience. We were writing for ourselves. And the feeling we get is that people are responding to that story of specificity, even if they're not Jewish. So that's what I love about the process. That's a little bit about the process. I'm sure that was really discombobulated, but I'm eager to hear from you guys to help me make sense of it all.
Great, thank you, Mika. This is Madeline chiming in. At this point, we'll turn to questions. You'll all be unmuted now, and if someone has a question, just feel free to jump in.
I'll jump in with a question if that's okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if people can just introduce themselves also as they're asking questions.
Cool. Hey, Micah, it's Danny Green. Nice to talk to you.
Hey, Danny Green.
I love the show. I've told everyone that I've talked to since watching the show that they have to watch the show. And that's pretty much literally everyone I've talked to. Curious to know about, you were talking about the writer's room, and I think that's so interesting how there was kind of a new approach taken to the creative process, and that kind of the purpose of the show to kind of expose this transgender character, this new type of character that has not been told, that, you know, it doesn't just end as an experience to the audience, right? That experience of kind of trying to break down gender norms and break down like heterosexual norms, that kind of enters into the writer's experience. And so I was curious to know a little bit more about kind of the makeup of that room. You said it was super diverse. I know there's been a lot written recently, and I'm involved in the LGBT community activism. There's a lot of excitement about the fact that there was just a transgender woman who has become part of your writing staff, who is kind of an activist in her own right. So I'm curious to know about kind of this addition of a new writer, and that there's press around a new writer, which that doesn't seem typical for the average TV show. How that might kind of change the experience for you guys, and just a little bit more on that.
Yeah, thanks, Danny. That's a good question. It actually pinpoints some of the controversy that surrounded our show from that we've received from the trans community. It is not often that you're so right that the hiring of a TV writer makes headlines. It was our decision to make it something that we did publicly. So because it was a feeling shared by us in the writer's room that to tell the story of this next season, where our lead character, Maura Fitzerman, played by Jeffrey Tambor, is going to really step out and live as a trans woman, that we needed to have someone in the room with us to speak to that experience firsthand, which is very complicated. There are a lot of writers' rooms in which, or I would say most writers' rooms are writers' rooms in which the people writing it haven't had the experience that they're depicting on screen. There aren't a lot of people who know a lot about dragons in the Game of Thrones writers' room. So it's there's an act that writers have to do, which is to give themselves permission to write about things that they don't know about. The same is true for actors. We came under fire from the trans community, from some people in the trans community, not all, actually not even most, for casting Jeffrey Tambor, who's a cisgendered man. And when I say cisgendered, it's CIS, which is a term that I learned, that is different from transgendered, so that you're not saying someone who's trans versus someone who's normal. So you say cis to denote someone who is living in the gender that they were born identifying as, or identified as. See, look at me, I'm butchering things. We came under fire for casting a man to play a transgender person. The idea being, how could this man depict the story of someone who was trans when they aren't trans themselves? Which is complicated because Jeffrey Tambor is an amazing actor, and the character that he plays is someone who is transitioning at age 70 from male to female. So we felt that it was actually kind of an accurate way to cast. It's also in the business of making a TV show, you want someone who's visible, who's well known, to be sort of your standard bearer. But when it came to the writing of the show, it was important for us to incorporate that additional voice. So unfortunately, there aren't a lot of trans women writers who are writing in TV that are out there. There's only a couple who are working in the industry today. So what Jill decided to do was she actually set up sort of an open call for any trans female writers to submit short stories or any piece of writing to us to sort of see if they could write for Transparent. We combed through all these stories. We found 6 that we loved, and we brought those people into a parallel writer's room that took place 2 weeks ago. In this writer's room were 6 people who had never written for TV before in their lives, and they worked with Jill to write an original pilot together. And it was a way to see kind of how people operated together in sort of the weird chemistry of a writer's room. It also gave people who didn't have experience writing for TV or using the software that we use to write scripts to get familiar with that, so that they, even if they didn't get hired, could be had the tools to write if they wanted to continue on doing that. And from that process, we ended up hiring a woman who is a professional musician. She's a musician whose stage name is Our Lady J. Her name is Jonna Speedo, and she is not a screenwriter by training, but she has the instincts and kind of the personality that when we all got to spend the last week with her on a writer's retreat, she fits right in, and it's apparent to all of us that that was the right choice. But I guess I'll just say the writer's room is, we have Jill, we have me, we have 2 other men, and we have 2 queer women, and another cisgendered straight woman, and now we have Jonna, also a trans woman, in the room, and that's it.
Micah, this has been really fun for me to hear you talk about your process. Thank you. I'm Hannah Kapnick Ashar. I'm Ben Kapnick's sister. I think we did Brown Bronson together. I am so amazed by how unabashedly Jewish the show is. And I'm just I would love to hear you talk more about that. I know you talked about how you guys kind of let people, it was like kind of autobiographical in a way, or like exposing yourselves in a way. And I'm curious. I really noticed it in I think it was the first episode where he talks about like the schnoz on the picture of somebody on a record. And it was so interesting to me that wasn't translated. And I'm curious about how you guys are kind of walking that line between this being like an expose of Jewish culture and like maintaining specifically Jewish features, and to what extent you feel like those are like general enough things that people might, that people in mainstream would be familiar with those things, or I guess like how you do that dance between like personal and private and Jewish and general.
Yeah. I love that question. I don't think we're walking the line. I think we just jumped onto one side of the line and we tripped, and we're rolling around on that side of the line, like, and we can't get up. It's slippery. It's just covered in schmaltz. So, I mean, actually, let me ask you a question, not to put you on the spot, but from your question, it seems a little bit like you have the same reaction that I do, which is sometimes you're watching the show or you're watching something and it feels like it's speaking right to you or representing you really accurately, and you actually feel a little anxious about that because you're suddenly worried about other people, like this other audience who might not get it, and then you sort of I get worried for them that they won't get it. Did you have that experience a little bit, or?
I think that I feel worried for them, and I also feel like a little vulnerable. Like this is like people who are not in my in-group are seeing into my in-group in like in the good and the bad of it, and that feels kind of vulnerable. It's great. Yeah. Like it is amazing to be spoken to directly the way that you just named that. I love that, and I also like noticed also some nervousness, and I'm curious if you experienced that or if you. I think that like when I name that for myself, it feels kind of like old world. Like I don't know if it's not exactly fear of anti-Semitism, I don't think, but it is like a fear of judgment, maybe, or.
Yeah, it makes me even writing that stuff. My mind is split, where I feel at once proud and then defensive and a little bit anxious. It's this idea that I think is just it's certainly hardwired in me, that at any point everything could just come crashing down. And the fact that we're exposing ourselves in all of our kind of specific sort of peccadillos that are only Jewish, or we're using sort of our inside language, but we're exposing it, we're writing about it, that makes me feel nervous sometimes when we're writing or when we're depicting it. And I definitely get this from my dad, who I think his main judgment, his main way to determine who is his friend or not is, would they hide me? So, and my family, which I think is definitely a real legacy that I've inherited, even though I try to mute it as much as possible. The Jewish stuff is real, and it speaks how it survived. I love using that word also, survived. How it survived is from our writer's room onto the screen, is representative of the process more broadly. I think I spoke to that. This is what we talked about in the writer's room, and this is what came out. And there was a moment when we were expecting that we would get notes or comments from reviewers or from our bosses at Amazon, from Jeff Bezos, who would say, I don't know what Sukkot is, I don't want this show to be on air. But that never happened. But I will say one last thing about this, and then if there's more questions. We were expecting transphobia when we launched the show, that we were going to be out there and people were going to call Jeffrey Tambor names. And when we launched a trailer for the series before the show came out on YouTube, YouTube comments are where you can always go to feel bad about yourself and humanity. And I spent some time just going down that hole, and I was surprised that there was very little transphobia, but there was a shit ton of anti-Semitism in the YouTube comments, and that was surprising. Things like, I can't believe the Jew-run media is making yet another show about itself. I guess putting us on a continuum with like Curb Your Enthusiasm or Seinfeld or other shows that feel Jewy. But that was surprising. It also doesn't matter because that's out there in the world, and we feel like right now, at least for the moment, our megaphone is louder than YouTube comments.
Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that? This is Judith Rosenbaum. I'm a huge fan of the show, and have also just been telling everyone in the world that they need to watch it. And I have to say, as I was watching it, I did feel like, wow, this is the most realistic depiction of Jews I've ever seen in any form of media. And I'm dying to know who the rabbinic advisor is on this. But my question is that I read in a couple places, and I feel like just also not in YouTube comments, but in just kind of hearing people talk about this, it feels like there's been this sense, and maybe I even heard Jill Soloway say this in one of the interviews, that the Jewish content has turned out to be more radical in some ways than the trans content, which is surprising to me, even though it does feel like it's a very new and different kind of depiction of Jews. So I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about that. Like, do you perceive it that way? Was there any sense in advance that that was going to be the case, or that was sort of part of the goal? Or is that just kind of an accidental thing that has emerged from the nature of the personal story?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't our goal to write a Jewish story. That's not the experience that we had in the room. It was definitely our goal to write a spiritual story. And not to spoil anything for the second season, but that kind of spiritual questioning, that kind of yearning, all the ways that we search for spiritual meaning or a way to explain our experiences, that will continue on as an important thing for us as a writer's room. I would say that the creative team, not just writers, but everyone, it feels, even if they're not individually spiritual people, I certainly struggle with that. We are a spiritual community, broadly speaking. We didn't set out to write a show that was explicitly Jewish, but those were the lives of our characters. Those were the experiences that they had, and that was sort of the water they were swimming in. And thinking about it now, and thank you, Judith, for asking, because maybe this is something that is interesting, at least to me in my small way, which is the transgender story is a story of tiptoeing and trepidation and secrets, and it is concealed. And the narrative spine of the first season is about revealing transness to the family and to the world. It's the story of Maura asking to be seen by the world, by her family first, and then the world. And so I think maybe people respond to the trans story with the same sort of vulnerability and care and quietness that Maura brought to that storyline. Whereas with the Judaism, that was shorthand. That was taken for granted. There was the pride of not closing the blinds or turning away or turning the camera off when these people talked about their lactose intolerance or talked about the fact that they come from shtetl people, where that might have been in its own way, even sort of subconsciously, more provocative, more in your face than the trans storyline. I would imagine, just to prognosticate a little bit, that the opposite will be true for the second season. I think we're going to be, I think people will have accepted the Jewiness, and we might give them a little bit more overt transness, or at least discussion of gender and gender expression.
Micah, this is Ella Steingart. Thank you so much. I'm wondering what type of advocacy if you as writers at the show have heard back, from the trenches, from sort of young people, how this has affected them, empowered them, and or if there are any kind of opportunities to use parts of the script as an opening dialogue in schools, or parts of the, showing parts of the episodes as a dialogue in schools or other places to open up the conversation.
Sure. So I have just a few things to say. The first thing is, yes, this show, and this is, I individually am not at the forefront of this part of the show. There are people who are so much better equipped to speak to the work in the sort of the broader transgender queer advocacy community than me. But Jill has said that this show is part of a movement, or that it is a movement, and we take social justice for the trans community incredibly seriously. That means that members of our cast and crew, the writers, are speaking on panels. We are attending events, vigils, marches, and the like. The show, it's not on broadcast TV, so it's not something that I would say the whole world is watching, but certainly everyone who I love, including you guys, are watching. But that process of thinking about parts of the show as curriculum or as discussion topics has begun. There's one organization called Get Lit that teaches poetry and spoken word in public schools in California. Every year, their finalists have an event where they're actually responding to scenes from movies and TV that they love, and writing their own original compositions. And this year, one of the finalists, and we got to attend the performance, the gala where it was performed, was a response poem to a scene in the second episode of Transparent. So things like that are happening. I would say we want to be part of this broader movement for acceptance and equality and justice. And sometimes we're at the forefront. Most of the time, we're trying really hard just to make a really good TV show and just to keep people thinking and engaged.
Micah, this is Igal from Tel Aviv. I don't know if the whole world watches your series, but in Israel there is a big audience for your TV show, and it's great, and I love it. And thank you very much. It's a great show. It has great questions to deal with. And actually, tomorrow we are going to vote on the topic of the Pride Parade this year in Tel Aviv. and I see a great connection between the discourse on transsexual and the LGBT movement at all. So you're doing a great job and raise great questions, and thank you.
Thank you.
This is Edith. Can people hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, this is Edith Klein from Keshet. We're a national organization that works on LGBT equality and inclusion in the Jewish community. And I just wanted to share, as per Ella's last question, and I don't know if, I've shared this with Faith Soloway, whom I know from Boston, but I don't know if it's filtered through to the rest of the Transparent team, that within the Jewish world, we're seeing in our institutional change work that Transparent is really affecting ripples of change. We're currently working with a rabbi who is like the rabbi in residence at a Jewish federation in California to co-create a curriculum for use with teens and adults. Our Jewish Federation here in Boston chose Jeffrey Tambor because of his role on Transparent to be the keynote speaker at an event at the end of January honoring a bunch of rising Jewish leaders. And just from my perspective, having done LGBT work within the Jewish world for the last 13 or so years, and having experienced many years of being told repeatedly by institutions that they only wanted us to address the L and the G because the B was confusing and the T was too scary. There's been a real shift in the last few years, and just, I would say, since Transparent came onto the screen and became part of kind of community discourse to the extent that it has both within the Jewish community and the queer community, I'm really just seeing an increased impact on people's interest and openness. So thank you very much for that. I'm also a huge, huge fan of the show and devoured season 1 and can't wait for season 2.
Thanks so much. That's so great to hear. And I'm sure that Faith will do an amazing job. She's one of my favorite people in the entire world. Any other questions? Any questions about entertainment, TV? More questions about kind of gender or how we got it, and certainly what this sort of the learning process and the learning curve is with all of this. Those are all things that that sort of have come to mind for me. Any other questions?
This is Danny. I have a question that's totally less intellectual than that. It was really about the show. The intro what do they call it? Like the credits, the intro credits that has that kind of montage. Well, I never really understood that like intro montage. Can you say anything about like what we're watching when we're watching that intro montage?
Hell yes, I can. We have. It was produced by Reese Ernst and Zachary Drucker, who were first hired on our show as our transgender consultants. They had an office right next door to ours where we would write something and we would bring it to them and we would say, tell us where we messed up. And they would help, and they would help sort of also build storylines that made sense. I wrote the episode that where Maura is in the women's bathroom at Neiman Marcus, and she's called out, and there's lots of sort of mean hate speech, and the idea that a public bathroom was a site where a lot of violence against transgender people takes place was something I never ever considered, and I owe them a debt of gratitude for just helping to shape that. Reese and Zachary are also incredible artists in their own right. They just had a show together at the Whitney Biennial, and we hired them to do the opening credit sequence, which I really love personally. It is intercut home video footage of people's bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs, and sort of bat mitzvah dances and also home video footage of cross-dressing performances, drag performances, and transgender people who sort of took sometimes sort of surreptitious or furtive video footage of their gatherings in the 80s and 90s. So it's all of those things all melded together. And they're actually some of our community's home videos. So the head of comedy for Amazon, our boss, his bar mitzvah is in there, for example.
Awesome. So this is Jeff Kessler again. Is there maybe one last question before we close?
This is Nama Paley. I'm going to jump in with a question. First of all, as Micah knows, because I emailed him throughout watching the series furiously, which I think I did in like 3 days. I'm also a huge fan of the show and really loved in one of the episodes when you show up as a member of the Chevra Kadisha, of the of the ritual community that deals with deaths in synagogues, which was just a really sweet and interesting moment to insert yourself. And even just coming off of the last thing you said about the head of comedy at Amazon having a clip of his bar mitzvah, I was wondering if there were other moments that you felt like you inserted yourself into the show or kind of snuck in a piece of your story. When we'd spoken yesterday before the call, you talked about how you kind of try to get into the inside jokes of the characters. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. I'll say that every writer on the show appears in the series. So I'll do, just to call it out, the cantor is Faith Soloway. That's one of the writers. Jill plays Celeste, who is the professor who at the sort of hardcore feminist lecture where she says that exclamation points are small rapes. And the two security guards at Judith Light Shelley's apartment complex are writers. And the members of the band that in episode 3 that Josh is supposed to sign on to when he's taken off at his other band, those are all writers. I'm one of them too. So we're everywhere in the series, and not just on screen, but in big and small ways. Because I was one of the only straight white dudes in the room, I felt a real sense of protection over Josh's character and put a lot of myself into that character. So a lot of the childhood experiences that he had, I shared, and that was actually a pretty powerful way to think about some of those parts of my formative years. There's inside jokes that we can't believe made it out onto the screen, like the Gautier song in the talent show was something that we sang to each other to annoy each other, and then we went and got the rights to use it in the show. So there's so many things that we just thought were funny because they were inside jokes for us. Another one is the butch poet at the talent show, where the top of her poem is something about the body of a woman, and the last line is Free Palestine. We thought that was funny because it sort of depicted I don't want to explain the joke. We thought it was funny, so we put it in, and it stayed. So there's every one of the writers feels like not just something in sort of a big sweeping, season-long art kind of way of theirs made it in, but everyone also feels like weird little things that they didn't even remember that they said, but they were recorded. Those things made it into. So in that way, we feel incredible ownership over the show. And I'll say also that is a testament to the to Jill Soloway for empowering us and to be open with our lives, and then also to protect the parts of us that we wanted to see depicted. I'll say one more thing, which is the very, very first draft of the pilot, and it actually made it, the pilot as shot, the family, their last name was not Pfefferman. Their last name was Fitzerman, which is my last name, that Jill thinks is a funny sounding name. So when she hired me to write the series with her, I very politely asked her to change the name from Fitzerman to anything else, because I did not want it to be misconstrued as my story or part of my family. It was important for us all to feel like we were disburdened of defending things or people who were like, really? Is your dad trans, Micah? Which is not my experience. So I didn't want to create that confusion. So Pfefferman, not Fitzerman.
Okay, great. That was awesome. I want to thank you so much for joining us, Micah. This has been awesome. I want to thank everyone for joining the call. It's been an awesome conversation, a really, really great prompt talk. Thanks also to Nama and the BYFI staff for helping us organize it. And in terms of our next prompt talk, it should be at some point in February, but kind of look out for an email about that in the coming weeks. And if anyone has any ideas, definitely feel free to get in touch with Nama, and she'll make sure that the right people hear about it. But yeah, I want to thank Micah again. It's been a really meaningful and awesome talk. Really thankful for Micah taking some time out of his day, and for everyone else taking some time to come together and listen to this. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Micah.
Bye.
Thanks so much, Micah.